Hello LAI 414-514 audience, welcome to the Week 12 presentation brought to you by Maria Gutman and Cassandra Hine. I am Maria Gutman. Today I'm going to be discussing with you Shane Koizen's poem To This Day, which was our featured TED Talk of the week, the article How Teaching Makes a Difference in Students' Lives by Cullen, Pollock, and Buskist. We're going to be listening to some examples of what students think bullying is. They're students at the school where I teach, and also we're going to be talking to a colleague of mine, and she's going to be explaining to us some strategies about how she prevents bullying in her classroom. So we're going to take a look at Shane Koizen's poem first, To This Day. So a little background on Shane Koizen. He's a Canadian spoken word poet and author. He's best known for writing about issues like bullying, eating disorders, cancer, sometimes real-world situations that can plague students that enter our classrooms. The video that Shane created for YouTube of the poem has had over 30 million views, so to say he's resonated with an audience really is a true understatement. Written word is so powerful, but now graphics are added in. Now the reader can really immerse him or herself in the poem through these visuals. The poem basically describes different characters, and even Shane himself, of how they experience bullying in their lives. Koizen provides us with examples even of his own experiences with bullying. For example, as a child he confused pork chops with karate chops. And one day he was climbing a tree and he fell down and was covered in bruises. Next day he went to school and his teacher, being a good teacher, noticed the bruises on his legs and questioned it. And Shane said with great enthusiasm, "Well, my grandma gave them to me. They're karate chops. I love karate chops." Meanwhile, he was really talking about pork chops. And poor Shane had to go through a big ordeal being pulled out of his grandma's house, and there was a big investigation to little know, behold, that it was a big misunderstanding. And poor Shane ended up with the lovely nickname of Pork Chop from when he was a child straight through high school. So nicknames can be things that are funny sometimes, but can also scar children. The poem is powerful because it teaches us how intelligence can be a way we can stand up for ourselves. For example, through Shane giving the obnoxious kid the answers to the homework assignment. It's so important that we as teachers show our students that each and every one of them has a hidden talent. They may not see it in September when they enter our classrooms. We may not see it in September. However, it's our job by June to break them out of that shell and help them find that special talent and to kind of nurture it. I think as a Catholic school teacher, I do that every day in my own classroom by incorporating my faith into all aspects I teach. And I teach my children to find that special element they have and to really nurture it and work with it. So this poem really struck a chord with me, and I thought, how can I have my students attempt a similar analyzation of a poem using illustrations? Being I teach third grade, the original poem would not be appropriate. So I began to research, and I came across the poem simply entitled The Bullying Poem by an unknown author. So first we discussed what the students thought bullying was, and we created a knowledge web on the chalkboard. I included a picture of that in our Dropbox folder, as well as in the little video that we're going to see about the drawings the students created. Then I gave each student a copy of the poem. We first read it together, then we broke down each stanza and discussed it. So since my class loves working collaboratively, I broke them into groups, and each group was responsible for drawing an illustration about the meaning of their stanza. So we're going to take a pause right now, and I put a little video clip in to show you how each group presented their findings and their interpretations of what the stanza meant. So this is group one. This is the snowstorm. They had stanza one. They went and broke up the stanza into using each line and then analyzing each line and drawing an illustration for each line, which I thought was pretty cool. You can see the word caption bubbles. And group two, the Fighting Ninjas, they kind of took a similar approach too, where they put some word bubbles, and you kind of see how they're drawing the bully is obviously bigger than its victim, which is a good analyzation. Group three, the Black Hurricanes, they kind of divvied up the poem, and their stanza of the poem kind of similar too, where they're using word bubbles, and again, they're using really forms of like physical aggression here. And then for the Phenomenal Four, they had the fourth stanza, which they kind of did this, instead of doing it into smaller parts, they did it as one big picture. This is a picture of all the four groups, their work. And it was nice that they worked collaboratively, even though sometimes it can be difficult when you're doing an illustration and not so much just working with text. they really truly enjoyed working on the project and to help their teacher with her schoolwork. And grades, there's no bias. And there are 4 main types of bullying: physical, verbal, cyber, and relational. All 4 are types of aggression, and the bully's main objective is to hurt another by creating repetitive actions and behaviors that are harmful to the other person. Physical bullying can involve hitting, punching, and threatening acts. Verbal bullying can be name-calling. Relational is social aggression, spreading rumors, excluding someone from others, ignoring them, or shooting other kids with evil looks. Cyberbullying is using technology, whether using email, social media, or text. The article tells us that males tend to engage in physical types of bullying and females in relational, what we think of as typical mean girl or catty behavior. It further tells us that bullying behaviors most often are experienced between 6th through 8th grade, and they decline in the upper grades. In my opinion, this isn't because bullying magically goes away, but rather students in high school do not want to report these instances. They rather just chalk them up as teenage years experience. Perhaps they don't want to be the rat their freshman year. They don't want to have their phone or their iPad or their computer taken away. The article breaks up the typical members of a bullying situation: the bully, the victim, and the bystanders. The bully usually has negative opinions about themselves. They view hurting someone as power. My experience with dealing with the bullying situation over the years is the bully can be most times popular with a lot of friends, which they use to their advantage. The victim is often perceived as the weird kid, the loner, the student that doesn't want to work in a group, the student that sits alone by himself at lunch and doesn't play with anybody at recess. Maybe they have no friends, and typically they're really not accepted by their peers. Lastly, the bystanders, the observers who are just as guilty by standing silent and do not stop the bullying, whether it's intervening physically or to go get an adult to help. So I decided to interview various grade levels at my school to kind of take a look at what students thought bullying was. The students are from the school where I teach at, St. Margaret of Crotona in the Bronx, and we're going to listen to these students. They range from grade levels 3 to 8. So,
my name is Mason. I'm 8 years old and I'm in grade 3.
okay, Mason. So Mason, to you, what is a bully?
A bully is like somebody who's super mean, and I don't like them, and I never want to be one of them.
Okay. Which ways can a student be a bully?
Like gossip or like pushing people around and stuff. Like, like punching them and stuff.
Okay. What do you think should happen to a student if they get caught bullying?
I think they should have a talk with the principal and stuff, because it isn't cool and it's not nice to bully.
Okay. What would you do if you see bullying happening?
I would go over and tell them to stop, but if it was like on the street, then I would literally, if they did it over and over again, that's when I would stand up for them and do what I do most.
Okay, last question, Mason. Why do you think some students bully?
Because they want attention and they think they're better than others. So even though some people look like kind of tall and stuff, they could usually think them like weak and stuff. So that's why they play around with them and stuff in a not nice way.
Okay, thank you, Mason.
You're welcome.
Okay, good.
My name is Thomas. I'm 9 and I'm in 4th grade.
Okay, so to you, what is a bully, Thomas?
Like someone who's bothering someone or being mean to them.
Okay. Which ways can a student be a bully?
Maybe like pushing them or punching them, or like they don't stop like bothering them.
Okay. What do you think should happen to a student if they get caught bullying?
I think they should get suspended or maybe kicked out of the school, because I don't think anybody wants to bully in their school.
Good. What would you do if you see bullying happening?
I would try to see if the bully would stop, but if they didn't, I would go to adult.
Good. And last question, why do you think some students bully?
Because maybe something's going on at home and they bring it out in school.
Great. Thank you so much, Thomas.
You're welcome.
Okay, Danny, go ahead.
I'm Danny. I'm 10 years old and I'm in 5th grade.
Okay, Danny. So to you, what is a bully?
A bully to me is someone who is being rude or being mean to someone over and over again.
Okay. Which ways can a student be a bully?
Often like through punching people or pushing people, but sometimes it can be just as hurtful to say something mean, to spread gossip.
Okay. What do you think should happen to a student if they get caught bullying?
Probably detention, because sometimes bullies, like when they get in trouble, they don't really get in trouble a lot.
What would you do if you see bullying happening?
Well, I would try to defend the person, but sometimes there's only so much you can do by yourself, and you should tell a teacher.
Good. And lastly, why do you think some students bully?
Well, sometimes it's just because they think they're better than people. Sometimes it's because they feel insecure about themselves, and they think that they can make themselves feel better by making other people feel bad.
Okay, great. Thank you, Danny, so much.
Hi, my name is Alexis. I am 11 years old and I am in grade 6.
Okay, so Alexis, to you, what is bullying?
It's a very serious issue that goes on in most schools where people are doing it to hurt someone else.
Okay, which ways can a student be a bully?
Physically, in person, or online.
What do you think should happen to a student if they're caught bullying?
I believe if they're caught bullying by talking and saying mean things to people, they should get suspended. And I believe if they're doing both just saying mean things to them and being physical with them, I believe they should be expelled.
What would you do if you saw a bullying situation happening?
I would step in and I would tell them to stop and I'd tell an adult.
Why do you think some students bully?
To get away from their sadness, and seeing other people upset makes them happier because deep down they're upset about something.
Okay, thank you, Alexis.
You're welcome.
I'm Jack, and I'm in 7th grade. Is that it?
Yeah, okay. So, sorry. So to you, what is a bully?
Someone who kind of like makes someone else feel bad more than once. Cause it's one thing if you like tease someone like once or like say something mean once, because maybe you're like in the moment. But if you're going back to do the same thing or make someone feel bad every single day, then I think that you're kind of bullying someone.
Okay. Which ways can a student be a bully?
Kind of like making fun of someone's like name or like what they look like or like their clothes. But like in our school, since we all pretty much wear the same thing, can't really do that. But I know in public schools that like if you don't have like the coolest sneakers or the coolest shirt, people make fun of you.
What about with like social media or
And
text?
on social media, you can kind of like, if you know like a secret of someone's, then if you like post that or text everyone that, then social media is kind of like an outlet for bullying, or for like, it's supposed to be for communication, but you can easily bully someone on social media.
So what do you think should happen to a student if they get caught bullying?
Well, it depends how many. If they've been caught bullying already, then they should either get suspended or expelled, depending on how or what they're doing. Because if you get caught bullying once, you should get like detention, and they'll like see if that fixes it. But if you keep doing it and you get caught more than once, then I think that there should be more severe consequences.
Okay, and what would you do if you see bullying happening?
Me, like personally, I would, I'd try and, I'd go up to the person, like, I wouldn't, like, because I've done this before, I wouldn't stop it, like, I wouldn't, like, go up to the person in the middle of doing it. Sometimes I would, but, like, maybe after recess, at lunch, I'll go up to the person and say, you shouldn't do that, it's mean, or something like that.
So why do you think students bully?
I think people bully because either there's like more like 3 reasons or something. There's one reason is to make themselves feel better because they feel bad about themselves because like nobody likes them or anything, so they're gonna make fun of someone else to kind of like get out of like to kind of like sort of make themselves feel better. Or if they see someone doesn't have any friends or is like small and can't really defend themselves, then they might try to
really like go after that person.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Jack.
No problem.
Hi, I'm Irene. I'm in the 8th grade and I'm 13 years old.
Okay, so Irene, to you, what is a bully?
A bully is somebody that tortures and like torments somebody every day of their life to make them feel bad.
Okay, so which ways can a student be a bully?
I think a student can be a bully by like just bothering and going after those who are like weaker than them, and that they see that they don't like those who don't have as much self-confidence. And I think like that's who mostly bullies torture and stuff like that.
Okay, how do you think social media plays a role in bullying?
Well, I think social media plays a role because like people can just post anything about somebody that might be true and spread rumors, which can hurt somebody's reputation.
Okay. What do you think should happen to a student if they get caught bullying?
Well, I think like they should get in trouble, but also I feel like an adult should talk to them, because usually when a bully is torturing somebody, they feel bad about themselves as well. So they should get help as well.
Okay, what would you do if you see bullying happening?
I would automatically tell an adult because that's the best thing to do.
Okay, and lastly, why do you think some students bully?
Well, again, as I said, like they feel insecure about themselves and they might be going through like hard times or something. So they go after those who have a better time sometimes, that have a better life that they're jealous of sometimes. And I think that's why they bully people.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Irene.
Thank you.
So I hope you enjoyed listening to those students. Some of them have been prior students of mine. Some of them I had their siblings over the years. So here at SMS, we have a zero tolerance policy, which basically means that once a student is disciplined for bullying, and if it occurs again, the principal has the right to either suspend or expel the student depending on the severity. The students here at St. Margaret's also participate in an anti-bullying program once a year with Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan is an anti-bullying expert. He travels around the US and Canada teaching students how to prevent bullying. He does it through role play and different strategies and games. You can find more information about Jim Jordan in a link I put in our Dropbox folder. So now that we as educators know the makeup of a bullying situation, what can be factors that we can do to prevent it? Well, one answer is for the whole school community to come together and work collaboratively. For example, teachers and the principal can create a program together, which also includes guidelines for cyberbullying, which a lot of schools are very hesitant to do because they feel that if cyberbullying is taking place off of school property, it's really not impacting the students in the school, which obviously is not true because it does affect them, and it then affects them when they enter the classroom the very next day. All staff must be proactive and not fearful to approach a situation they deem bullying. The study in the article also recommends for teachers to form relationships with counselors and for bullies to receive social cognitive training. Now, in 18 years of teaching, I've never heard of the approach of using social cognitive training to kind of redeem bullies. This really intrigued me. So the two types of social cognitive training the article discussed to reform bullies was REBT, or Rational Emotional Behavior Therapy, in which the bully identifies the unhealthy thoughts and attitudes that they have towards another, and they work to reprogram themselves. The second was SFBC, or Solution-Focused Brief Counseling, where the bully examines their personal strengths and skills and decides how to use them properly. I found it interesting that the article did not mention any type of social cognitive therapy for the victim, because obviously the victim has to have an underlying reason as to why they don't either stand up to the bully or they don't get outside help. Lastly, the ELE teacher can play a role by having the students journal their emotions and work on their communication skills, or by using bibliocounseling, which I thought was an interesting approach. This is where the students read about a character similar to them in their situation in a novel or a story, and they analyze how the character solved the problem. Now, this is a great approach, but it may be an approach that might be used later on after the initial bullying situation is handled. So to sum up the article, it's the job of all involved in a school setting to help prevent and combat bullying. So I thought, how can we take this a little further? So I went to a colleague of mine, Ms. Trisha Scott. Trisha is our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade ELA and social studies teacher here at St. Margaret's, and we're going to listen to Trisha talk about some strategies she uses to prevent bullying in her classroom. Okay, hope everybody enjoyed listening to Ms. Scott. So LAI audience, we're sitting here with my colleague, Ms. Tricia Scott. Ms. Scott teaches 6th, 7th, and 8th grade ELA and social studies, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about her strategies she uses in the classroom to prevent bullying. Hello there, Ms. Scott.
Hi, Mrs. Gutman. One of the things that has influenced me the most is something that our principal, Mr. Keenan, said a couple of years ago, that bullying is not what the student who would be considered the bully, if you will, believe it is. It's what the student who is on the receiving end of things feel. And so as long as a student feels uncomfortable because of the actions of another student, then that is considered bullying. And I think that that's important because then it allows me at the beginning of the year to tell students that as long as they make another student feel uncomfortable through whatever actions they do, then that is considered bullying. And so at the beginning of the year, I usually start off by telling students that everyone should be comfortable. And so I pay attention to little things. So if, for example, a student answers a question and others are snickering in kind of a mean-spirited kind of a way, I make a big deal about it from the very beginning. And so that sets the tone, I think, in terms of what is acceptable in my classroom. But it also empowers those students who might be a little hesitant at the beginning to use the word and say another student is bullying me. As long as they can say that another student is doing something that is making him or her uncomfortable, then for me, that is where I intervene and I take action. Sometimes just warning a student is enough. And I've found over the years that starting off by laying that groundwork and having students know that they have no business causing another student to be uncomfortable in the room, that sets the tone. And so far, there have been very few instances, not that it hasn't happened, of students bullying other students.
What about with cyberbullying?
That has been our biggest challenge, I'll be honest with you, because a lot of times it happens outside of the our building or control, if you will. But it does make its way here at our school. That's usually where we get the parents involved, especially since usually it happens with, their computers, their phones at home. And so we really feel that parents have to take part and share in that issue. We've had to deal with it, and like I said, we usually pull in the parents in that in those instances because they too must recognize that the actions of their children outside of the school might be affecting how other students are feeling. So we've called out those students in those cases, but we usually the home plays an equal role in dealing with that issue.
So why do you think students sometimes don't step up and tell a teacher that bullying is occurring?
Oh, that is a recurring issue. That common thing, you don't want to be the person that snitches or whatever it is on others. And so most of the time when we do find out, it's when it's been bothering them for a long time. We've also had instances, I've certainly had instances where they'll tell you, but they ask you, even parents will tell us, but they'll ask us not to say anything. It's a challenge because I'm always reluctant to leave something, and I usually try as best I'm able to go around, deal with it in a way that wouldn't outrightly tell how I know about it, but it's really hard not to address an issue when you find out that it does exist.
So why do you think we as teachers, though, sometimes don't kind of label a situation as bullying, where we kind of think of it's more of it's a teasing situation?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I found with my older boys, 8th grade boys for instance, 7th and 8th grade boys, that I've had that dilemma where I'm not sure whether I should call it bullying or rough play, if you will. And one situation last year was where a family was labeling that kind of a thing as bullying. And what I did actually was I watched the boys involved, and recess is a great time to really observe them. And I actually came to the conclusion that it wasn't, because he was friends with the boys. They sat together at lunch, they played around during recess, and it was my conclusion that it was just they had not yet developed a way of dealing with rough play that was a little bit too rough. And so his response was to call it bullying. And I actually did not. I did not accept it. I did tell the parents that I noticed that these are his friends and he does hang out with them during those times, and that it's just a matter of him dealing with his friends and letting them know, okay, stop, I'm serious. So that can be a challenge.
So do you think in the older grades, specifically, like kids just throw around the word bullying?
I have not found that they use it all the time, but like I said, there have been a few instances where parents are more willing to use the word, and it becomes a situation where you have to figure out, is that what it really is? I do not find that the students so much use that word. Quite the opposite, actually.
Do you think we as a faculty and as a school have a good anti-bullying program?
I do like those times when we've had outsiders come in and share, their knowledge and their strategies. I think those instances have been pretty good. And I feel like they're more willing to use the word, talk about it, when we have those other people come in and talk about it. I think sometimes they zone us out. So it's been useful. I think individual teachers are able to set the tone of their classroom. Obviously, we always have the opportunity to go to our principal to deal with these issues. I would say that at our school, we do deal with the bullying in an effective way.
I agree. Any last comments, Ms. Scott?
It's one of those issues that can become a little cliche because we talk about it, they hear about it, it's everywhere. But it's still real, and even if it's only one student who feels that way, or just a few students, then it is an issue, and it must always be addressed.
Thank you so much, Ms. Scott, for giving me some time.
Okay, you're welcome.
The Difference in Students' Lives by Cullen, Pollock, and Buskist. So this article starts out by comparing and contrasting two pretend teachers, Professor Excellent and Professor Good. Each teacher looks identical, but Professor Excellent not only teaches her content, but she forms relationships with her students. This is super important because remember back to Rita Pearson's TED Talk, students don't learn from teachers they don't like. This is something that I hold near and dear to my heart and firmly believe that we need to create relationships with our students, even if it's on the smallest level, that we can relate to them and they can relate to us. Teaching really is not a series of techniques. It's rather learning about how we relate to our students and how our students then relate to us to have a great flow in our classroom. What we really learn in undergrad and graduate classes sometimes is applicable to the real world situations in our classroom. Oftentimes it's trial and error. No two teachers are alike, even if the content they teach are identical and they have similar ideas. Your personality is what molds you as a teacher and your classroom. I always show my class I care, even when it's hard on some days, or even when it's the hardest student who sometimes questions me, makes me question myself as to why I'm teaching. And yes, if you haven't had that student, ladies and gentlemen, you will eventually have them enter your classroom. But those are the ones that need you the most. My classes become my kids even when they leave my room in June. They know that my door is always open. The relationships we form in the present, well, they'll still be there in the future if we connect the right way to our students. I still have past students that come back and tell me, hey, Mrs. G, do you remember when we did this project? Or we did this group activity? And these are students that I've had 10, maybe 12 years ago. I'm even right now lucky enough to have a former student who is a senior at Manhattan College here in the Bronx. She's in the undergrad education program, and I'm actually mentoring her as a student teacher. So to me, this truly shows that my job really isn't just a profession, it's a vocation. It's who we're called to be. Well, class, let's take a pause right now And I want you to reflect by answering these two questions. If you could put your comments down below, that would be awesome. First, why did you want to become a teacher? And second, how do you want to be remembered by your students? The full text of Shane Koizen's poem To This Day, a link to the animated version on YouTube, the full article on bullying, and information about Jim Jordan can all be found in our presentation folder for week 12. Now to Cassandra.
Hi everybody, I'm Cassandra Hine, and I'm going to be shifting gears a little bit for part 2 of our video and talk about teacher accountability. So let's start with our lasting impact article. So this was the research that had tracked 2.5 million students over the course of 20 years. These were from large urban school districts and about the 4th grade to adulthood. So what we're looking at here was the value added ratings, and this is referring to the average test score improvement for a teacher's students. So we're looking at the result of instruction and how they performed on these big standardized exams. And this was done over short-term and long-term periods and how they were impacting students over both short-term and long-term periods. So what they had found was that a higher value-added rating meant that students were more likely to attend college, earn higher salaries, live in better neighborhoods, and save more for retirement. They also added that they were less likely to have children as teenagers, which I thought was extremely interesting. And then we had the financial part of this research that had stated a higher value added rating was worth more than $250,000 to the average classroom. The only thing that I have an issue with in terms of this quantity is, where is the money coming from? Where is the money going to? How did they estimate this, right? I mean, that's maybe something you guys want to talk about in the comments below, but that's definitely questions that I was asking, but I felt it was important to note because it is definitely a large number. But here's the story. Acknowledging the realities of the study, we would have to really now distinguish between good and bad teachers. And how can we do that? Is there really a dividing line? Is there a dividing factor to do this, to say who's good, to say who's bad? Or are we really going to be basing this off of test scores? Because for me, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that there are way more things that we need to take into account before we are just looking at the return grades of our students. This brings me into the next article that I found because I wanted to dive deeper into this notion of really judging teachers as good or bad. So I found an article by Francis Schrag, and it was titled Teacher Accountability, A Philosophical View. And what this article discusses is education and teachers through the perspective of a corporation. So now what we're looking at is teachers in terms of salespeople, right? So continued failure to make sales will probably result in the loss of the job. And this kind of reward structure seems heartless in terms of education, but for business, a company that would be rewarding salespeople equally and not really based on their return to the company, it wouldn't flourish. It'd probably go out of business. So this is where I started to struggle because this is a good argument. And I mean, I would love to hear what you guys think about this argument, but for me, I can see it. I can understand where they're coming from, right? So there's this whole idea that we don't really get the same luxury as salespeople do, right? If company A fails to make a sale, that's because the customer made a decision to buy from company B. They get a certain choice. We don't really get that choice, right? And neither do our students. We all end up together per chance, per scheduling and administration, right? So now it comes down to the success of the student, I feel, is dependent on more than just the teacher. I think that administrators need to be involved in this. I think that parents need to be involved in this. And I think overall student disposition is something that we should be taking into account a lot of the time, honestly, whether that's intrinsic motivation, whether that is their standard of learning or their type of learning, their intelligence in terms of the content area, or even their interest in the content area. These are big deals, and especially when you're outside of their domain. So for example, I'm certified in English, high school English. For me, I think about, what about other classes? What about a science teacher? How can you be held accountable for a student who's really not competent in domains like reading and writing? And then their score reflects your inability to teach. I don't see that as fair. But that's why I'm kind of asking you guys as well, because I wanted to come here with one clear claim to discuss, but it ends up I have more questions than answers. So I'll keep talking, and I hope that you guys, there's things to write about, because I know that the commenting can be a little bit awkward for me too. But moving on. So now when we get to these dispositions and the types of students that there are, I think that we also need to take into account the types of teachers, right? So this brings me into our Taylor Malley video. I loved this. I found it to be profound. I found it to be really like snarky. It was a comeback, you know? So when you're sitting around with other professions where the stigma is that they might be making more money than you, or that they may be more intelligent than you, that's not why we're here. We're here because we love the content, and we're here because we love the students. And that reflects in our pedagogy, and I think that comes across clearly and often. So Taylor Malley, what I really liked is when he's asked, what do you make? He comes back with, I make kids who work harder than they ever thought they could. I make parents see their children for who they are and who they can be. I make them question. I make them criticize. I make them write, and then I make them read. And I think this is something where we can all get behind. We're here for the students. We want them to do better and to be better. And the issue comes down to, what if we're doing all we can? We're providing the scaffolds in terms of an English class. I'm giving graphic organizers, and I'm giving sentence starters. My rubrics are in the form of checklists, so that now not only are you following the rubric, but you're checking off to make sure that you're also hitting those markers, and you're not losing points in any area because it was too convoluted or inside of a paragraph prompt. This is also where our universal design for learning comes in. Multiple means of representation, multiple means of presentation. So what you have on the board is also in a sheet in front of you, which you're also saying out loud to the class. Students who maybe aren't stronger writers, which we want them to be, you offer them the option to, maybe they want to talk. Maybe a video is the way that they feel comfortable presenting the information. I think that if we're making the content as accessible as possible, then we're doing the right thing. So I also now, when I'm thinking of all of this, here comes now my questions. What about ELL classrooms? What about students who are just not at the standard of language yet to hit that proficiency level to get my value added ratings up? What happens if I'm in an inclusion classroom and I have students that are being constantly tracked by IEPs who really might not be there but are almost there? That's going to go on my value added rating. So that stuff, to me, while I understand the corporate perspective of Francis, I still think that there's so much more we should be talking about. I don't really agree with looking at me solely in terms of on paper. Personally, a quick note, I'm certified in English and I'm a substitute here at the school. So what happened was, at the end of the last year, a teacher unexpectedly had to leave, and she was certified in physics. They could get no one to cover this class. So I had to learn physics every single morning to teach physics in the afternoon. And what was interesting was that the school still came back to me and told me, like, wow, congratulations, you had a 77% passing rate. And I found it interesting because now that score, that percentage, is attached to my name in this district as a teacher. Meanwhile, I'm an ELA certified teacher, and physics was not easy. And I commend those of you in the science discipline, because there were days where I showed up to class and I was like, look guys, I don't even fully understand the material yet. I need another day, so we're going to take a day, and we're not going to try to do something and make us all confused. There's not going to be the blind leading the blind in this class. And they took they really took very well to that. So that openness and that vulnerability and that empathy, that's something that characterizes me as a teacher. And I would hope that just because of the percentage attached to my name, that there would still be some review of my actual personality in the room and the way that I'm reflective or the way that I'm choosing to instruct a class. So this leads me into my next point. I'm somebody who's very extremely open with my students. I talk to them every single day about the things that we're doing, about the things that we're learning, about what I'm struggling with. So what I did was ask them personally what they had felt. And what I wanted to know was, what do you consider a good teacher? And what are the characteristics of your favorite teacher? And if you put them side by side, is this the same person or is it a little bit different? Really, really cool answers. And the kids here are amazing. The climate of the school is awesome. But I did want to share with you one, that this is a 10th grade girl, and she's just talking about her social studies teacher in this school, who I can attest to is awesome. So here's what she said. My favorite teacher this year is named Miss N. I'll call her a pseudonym. She teaches social studies, Global 2, and although I'm a 95 plus student in her class, that's not why she's my favorite teacher. It's more about how she incorporates her personality into her teachings. In the beginning of the year, she made it clear the way some teachers teach aren't for everyone, but it's your choice to pay attention and collect the facts needed to pass. If you were to spend even one day in her class, you would easily be able to conclude that she has a way to make literally anything interesting and worth listening to. She always thoroughly describes some events in history as if they would possibly happen in today's world and how our world would react. I'm beyond thankful for teachers like Miss N, because teachers like her are the reason I actually enjoy going to school and enjoy improving my education every single day. I found this to be awesome, and I'll scan these and post them so that you can read through them more. But let's go through the things that she hit here. Not only is she her favorite teacher, but this is a good teacher, right? This is somebody who is, first of all, she's open and honest. And we know that we're going to come into contact with so many students over the course of so many years, and even just day to day. I mean, I get moody sometimes too, and I know that changes me. But she's honest with them right away that you might not like me, but it's also your job and your responsibility to make sure that you're collecting this content and collecting to the material. I think that that's something we all have to understand, is we're not going to access every single student, but we have to make them aware that even if they don't truly like us, even if we're not their favorite teacher, we're still a good teacher, and they need to be a part of what's going on here, and they need to be held accountable for what's happening inside the classroom. I agree with that. Next, she makes things relevant, and I think that's something we see all the time across the board, across my classes and across our disciplines, is the fact that we need to be making things relevant and we need to be making things authentic. The fact that Miss N is constantly taking old knowledge and putting it into something new for students to really visualize what's happening here, I think that that's what really creates a bridge and builds on those earliest schemas. And that's what's creating a deeper understanding, a connectivity to the knowledge. It's not just rote routine and memorization. It's not just dates and names and places. It's something a little bit bigger. And I think students really identify with that, as we can see. Also, I like the idea that she explains has her personality in the teaching. And that's something that's huge for me, because I'm not separate from my teaching personality. This is my personality. This is what I enjoy doing. So I think it's important for us to recognize that there are so many different factors that go into this. And while the climate surrounding our schools right now is really holding teachers at extremely high standards in terms of test scores and in terms of student return, I think that it's very important we really take into account who we are and what our philosophy is and our pedagogy and what we choose to do, and how we make sure that we're really not teaching to the test. And I know it's important too, but there are ways to work backwards from the standards to make sure that we're being all inclusive, we're being multimodal, we're making sure that students with learning disabilities can access the material. Even if they might not pass the exam, we can still get them to learn something. And I think that that's really what the most important part is here. I'll post everything on Dropbox. This way you can read through the different materials, and I'll show you the really cool differences between our mainstream students and how they answered my prompt versus our self-contained students. We see how they did more of like a list format, but it's all the same. Our favorite teachers are the ones with personality. They're the ones that are making things authentic, making things relevant in the classroom. It's not all about the standardized exams. It's not drill and practice. It's not memory. And our good teachers we're seeing, they're the ones doing the same thing, except they're still holding you accountable for the knowledge. And I think that's what I'm really taking away in terms of teaching accountability, is that yes, I am accountable for making students hit these standards, and I am accountable for helping them to pass the exams. But as the proverb goes, you guys, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink. So that's where I'm going to end. Enjoy your week, you guys.